By 2010, after working day and night, Frank had built a massive stockpile of fake 20s. He had about $250 million. Now all he needed was buyers. For this, he contacted his old drug dealers gang, but surprisingly none of them were interested. And even stranger was many of them warned him to be careful. Frank was shocked. Hardened criminals who commit such serious crimes were warning him on this issue? But we know Frank by now, he refused to back down. And eventually, after pursuing for some more time, he found 4 buyers. They were exporters and importers who planned to sell this money overseas. Initially, they were a bit hesitant, ordering only 10 grand at once. But once they saw the quality of these bills, hesitation vanished. Orders jumped from 10 grand to 100 grand and eventually up to $1 million. It was a great start, but nowhere near close. Frank, after all, had 250 millions to move. Frank needed more customers, big corporations, not small-time criminals. His plan was simple: flood this money in international market first, like Europe, Asia or Africa, before it reached US. That way, it would be impossible for the investigators to track it back to him. Frank wanted right kind of buyers. He assigned this job to one of his trusted associates who had deep underground connections. Orders started coming in. The business plan was simple. For every $100,000, Frank made $30,000 in real money. To make it simple, every note he printed would earn him $6. But Bourassa was careful. He never spoke to the customers directly. Instead, he built layers between himself and the buyers, using a strict 3-tiered system. Every person in the chain only knew what they needed to know. If the cops caught someone, they would have to go through multiple layers before even getting close to him. With most of the orders coming in 6 figures, money poured in. Whatever investment Frank had made for this business, he recovered that with just 3 deals. Frank was on his way to become the millionaire he always dreamed of. But along with success in money came the paranoia. He barely slept, spending hours staring out of the window with binoculars, scanning for anything suspicious while his team counted and packed the bills. The biggest stress was the special paper. It had to be smuggled from Switzerland, and every delay made him nervous. What if the authorities were waiting at the port? Still, despite his fear, despite his paranoia, Frank wasn't stopping. He had built something powerful, and he was ready to do whatever it takes to protect it. Frank's business was running smoothly, but not as fast as he had thought. Then came the 5th buyer. This guy stole construction equipments for a living. He placed an order for $100,000. And then the very next day, he placed another order for the same amount. And then another. For a week, Frank kept supplying whatever this guy demanded. It was good money after all. But it was a trap. This guy was an undercover RCMP officer, playing the role of a seasoned gangster. Everything came crashing down on May 23, 2012 at 5 a.m. Bourassa woke up to the loud banging at his front door. Voices shouted from outside, demanding he should surrender. When he opened the door, he met a team of RCMP officers and 2 US Secret Service agents. His house was thoroughly searched. The police found guns, counterfeit bill testing pens, marijuana, and $949,000 in counterfeit $20 bills. They arrested him on multiple accounts of frauds. The police even told him that he would be facing at least 60 years in prison. Frank didn't argue, because deep down somewhere he knew that this moment would come. The police found almost $1 million in his house, which was enough to sentence him for his lifetime. But what they didn't know, what they underestimated, was the extent of his operation. Because somewhere out there, hidden in secret, was $250 million in fake 20s. For law enforcement, this arrest was a major victory, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. After his arrest, Frank was subjected to continuous questioning. He knew that he was in deep trouble with the Canadian authorities. But what was surprising was the involvement of US Secret Service. The moment they walked in, everything changed. Frank knew he would face charges in Canada, but the Secret Service wanted him extradited to America, where the punishment would be much severe. If convicted there, he would spend his life locked away, thousands of miles away from home for the rest of his life. His future, his career, whatever he had with his life, everything came crashing down. After this came the real blow. The charges started piling up. Manufacturing counterfeit money, 20 years. For possession, another 20 years. And for distribution, 20 more. It was totally 60 years, which for a 42-year-old man such as himself was a death sentence. If the US got what they wanted, Bourassa would never see the outside world again. The US Secret Service agents didn't waste any time. They gave Frank an offer to give up the names of his trusted associates and partners. Things would go easy for him. But Frank refused. He knew the risks. If he did that, he would be a target, even in prison. So Frank thought of taking his chances in the court, rather than giving up names of his associates. And after this, Frank's lawyer arrived. This guy was known for his skill in the courtroom. Someone who could challenge the toughest prosecution. If anyone could save Frank, it was him. Then the legal battle began. The government lawyers were determined to convict Frank. But Frank's lawyer had a smart move. The police had seen Frank enter the garage with an undercover cop, but they had never seen him with the money. Which means the search warrant used by the police to break into Frank's house was illegal. So whatever evidence they collected using that search warrant, including the money and Frank's confession, weren't admissible at the court. The negotiations were slow and difficult. At first, prosecution stood still, not willing to make any kind of deals. Frank's lawyer had to work really hard to reduce the severity of the charges. As the case moved forward, Frank could only wait and see if his lawyer could keep him out of US prison. The authorities wanted one thing: Bourassa's secret print shop and whatever counterfeit money he had printed. But Frank was not ready to give it up that easily. He waited for the right moment. That moment came just before a courtroom hearing. In a quiet hallway, Bourassa turned to his lawyer and asked a strange question. What if someone had a huge amount of counterfeit money? Could they trade it for their freedom? Lawyer hesitated, knowing the risks. But Bourassa pushed, and then he made his move. He claimed that he had 200 million in fake 20s and he was ready to give it up for his freedom, and the authorities agreed. After all, the evidence that was collected against him was not strong enough and he was released on a $10,000 bond. However, he was still not fully clear. The US Secret Service was keeping a close eye on him. One wrong move and that could push his extradition to the America. To put an end to this, the Canadian government offered him a deal. If he handed over whatever counterfeit money he had left, he would only face minor charges: drug possession, a $1,500 fine, and 45 days in jail. Bourassa took the deal. At the end, he spent less time in prison for counterfeiting millions in fake money than he spent for growing cannabis. This was an outcome nobody expected. One that even criminals like El Chapo could never dream of. After his release from the prison, Bourassa didn't disappear. Instead, he rebranded himself and started a security company, and even launched a self-help program called the Paradigm Shift System. It was an unexpected turn. One of the biggest counterfeiters of the world is now teaching people how to change their lives. But here's the real twist. For the last few years, he has been working against counterfeiting and even helping authorities fight the very crime he once mastered. It was almost comedic, like Frank Abagnale, the con artist turned FBI consultant. Bourassa hadn't printed a few $1,000,000. He had printed 250 million. And he handed over 200 million to the authorities. Now the question is, what happened to the remaining 50 million? No one knows. And that's what makes him the greatest counterfeiter of all time.